Hello, my name is Star Manili. I am the composer of the PianoForte Method. Today, we're going to be really exciting and discuss middle C, and specifically some of the problems that come up when we're teaching students to read notation and the problems that middle C causes. So a question I often ask my students is this: why is it called middle C? And they will straight away answer, it's called middle C because it's in the middle of the piano. And yes, that's true. Middle C does happen to be in the middle of the piano, and that is sort of handy for us. But it's not the reason that it's called that. And this is a very important point that can really derail understanding of how to read music. And it's what we're going to talk about today. Really, the significance of the clefs. So middle C is called middle C because it is in the middle of the treble clef and the bass clef. That is the reason. And when we approach reading from a middle C point of view, what we're doing is we're gluing the student to middle C, but specifically middle C right here on the keyboard. And then we build out from that, and it sort of transitions into the treble clef and the bass clef, which can be misunderstood as right hand and left hand. And the problem with this method is that middle C in print is not fixed. It moves. It moves when you're in this gap. When you're in this gap between the treble clef and the bass clef, middle C can be printed higher or lower depending on the notes around it, depending on its relationship within the context of the music. And this can be slightly confusing because although we are teaching and we're approaching notation from this fixed point of view, the fixed point of view being middle C is this circle with a line through it, like this, it itself is moving. And then we run into the problems of, if we have other ledger lines in between these two staves, those aren't middle C, those are different notes. And sometimes a note that has a line through its circle, if it's above the treble clef, although that's an A, it could look like middle C. So the whole problem arises because we have taught middle C out of context of the clefs. And I'm going to share some ideas on how to make this more clear. So one of the ways to do this in the very beginning is to teach the landmark note, any landmark note, but let's start with treble G. So we're going to teach the note treble G, but we're not going to do it with a whole treble clef. We're going to find treble G on the piano, and we're going to sing it. Treble G is an easy note to sing. And now we're going to give that pitch its own symbol, and the symbol is the treble clef. So I've drawn some diagrams that I'm going to share with you. Hopefully this helps make sense. Second, I've dropped one. So this is obvious to us, but I'm going to point it out. So we have the treble clef, and this line obviously is treble G. No matter what, it's treble G. And then what happens is, if we want to have notes that are higher or notes that are lower, we continue to draw lines, creating lines and spaces down and up above treble G. And it can be played with any hand, and effectively, or realistically, we could actually compose all our music with the treble clef and just have millions of lines up and down. That's not convenient to read, but that is the concept. And so treble clef becomes treble G, not right hand. And then what we could show the student is that, in fact, the treble clef can move around. So I can have, let's say I have 5 lines, we could have any amount, but if I put treble clef here, this one is treble G. If I put treble clef here, this one is treble G. If I put treble clef here, this one, so on. So the point is that the treble clef represents this G with this frequency. and we can sing that G. The same as with the bass clef. This line represents this particular F, bass F, and so on. And we can do the same exercise building out from bass clef. We could do everything in bass clef. Inconvenient to read, but effectively that's what we could do. So that this is actually a really useful exercise. So we have one line. This is treble G, bass F, treble G, bass F. Any hand, any timing, any way you can play it, but it's moving you around the keyboard, because that is the point of the clefs, is to move us to different registers, higher and lower, and make it more convenient to read those notes. Now, if we want to teach from middle C position, if we wanted to teach using middle C as our first landmark, what we really should be doing is teaching the C clef. And that's this. So that this line through the middle of the C clef is middle C. And this is much different than some of the diagrams you get where you have the whole stave, treble clef, bass clef, with middle C highlighted in the middle, that flips on its side and coordinates, because that's not actually true, because you can move the lines and spaces up and down depending on where you've put the clef. So the way to introduce middle C, even though we don't use this clef in piano music, is by introducing the C clef. And then you can read up and down. So effectively, the C clef is overlapping the treble clef and the bass clef and helping make sense of the middle register of the piano. Because the middle register, if all we did was play in the middle register, we could just use the C clef and that's it. So this is what it looks like. We have the C clef, the top two lines of a C clef stave overlap with the bottom two lines of the treble clef, and the bottom two lines of a C clef stave overlap with the top two lines of a bass clef stave. Effectively, we have this overlapping. And this is not right hand or left hand. It's in the middle of this diagram, which also happens, ironically, to be in the middle of the piano. Now drop my paper again. So here it is, written a bit more like this. Sorry, I'm giving weird diagrams. So I've spread it out, because in piano music we make this big gap here, but this is still effectively what's happening. And when I introduce this to students in this way, and it's not the first lesson, we nibble away at this concept over several weeks as we're learning what the treble clef is and what the bass clef is and how it represents the different registers on the piano and in sound. They understand it, and we don't necessarily ever read in the C clef, but they understand what it means, and that this C clef represents middle C. So when we're talking about ledger lines, let's talk about ledger lines. Here's bass clef. So here's middle C. You can see we can have middle C as one line, or we could even shorten it into little lines. That means that this line above here is the line above middle C. So we have two lines and then three. So we're effectively reading upwards from middle C. This is really a powerful way to teach reading. And yes, it takes time, and we have to do lots of exercises to remind them how it's functioning. But they begin to understand that the clef is literally a key. It is a key to which register we're using. And we can use any of them. We just use the ones that are most convenient for what we're doing in the moment. That's why middle C is sometimes positioned in the stave, in the grand stave, sometimes positioned higher up, closer to treble, and sometimes positioned lower down, closer to bass clef, depending on the ease of reading and of playing, or rather how it's relating to its neighboring notes in a musical context. And that is the secret of reading, and the secret actually behind the entire PianoForte method is giving students a rich understanding of the relationship between pitches and how we can move from one pitch to another, and then how those movements are represented in notation. So one of the exercises we have in the membership is a set of 2 worksheets where the students are asked to find middle C. But middle C is not just a circle with a line through it. Middle C is written in context of notes around it so that they can find it and find where middle C is. It is not a high A or a low E, above or below either stave, that it is in the middle, and it is a sort of an extraction of the C clef tacked on to the others. I hope that makes sense. So that is the discussion of middle C, its troubles, and some solutions that I hope will help make teaching reading a little bit easier in your studio. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from you.